Hey everybody, it's Scott. I had the opportunity a few days ago to talk with Mike over at the Intergalactic podcast about Babylon 5 movies. Mike just finished watching Babylon 5 for the very first time, and he is now going to be starting to review a lot of the content from that show. And he started out by doing a ranking of the Babylon 5 movies. So we spent about an hour just generally nerding out about sci-fi and talking about some of our favorite and not so favorite B5 movies. Of course, for our newbies, this is a spoiler discussion, so if you have not watched all the B5 movies, put this into the save category and come back to it after you've finished up the entire show. Please go down to the show notes and be sure to go to Mike's podcast and give it a subscribe. I'm really enjoyed chatting with Mike, and I hope to do it quite a bit more down the road. And we really want to help him out and build up his audience. So go ahead and click on that link and check out his podcast. I see he just dropped a review of the quintessential sci-fi epic that is Jason X. So why wouldn't you go check him out? Okay, everybody, thanks so much and enjoy the conversation about the Babylon 5 movies. Have a good one.
I posed as a meter reader. I put a bug on the tall kid's mom's place. For 3 hours straight, all they talked about was something called Babylon 5.
Hey, it's Mike. Welcome to Intergalactic, the podcast about the most essential sci-fi TV and movies of all time. This week, we're launching a new series, and it's all about one of the absolute best TV shows ever made. Not just sci-fi TV shows, best TV shows ever made. A TV show so good, it inspired the creators of Lost, Battlestar Galactica, probably hundreds of other shows. A show so good, and I'm so stupid. I didn't start watching it until 30 years after its premiere episode. And now that I've seen the whole thing, it's one of my all-time favorites. And there's so much about it I want to explore. Yes, I'm talking about Babylon 5. And here to help me kick things off is Scott McFarlane from the Gray 17 podcast. What's up, Scott?
Hey, how we doing? Thanks for having me on.
I am a huge fan of your podcast, Gray 17, the best Babylon 5 podcast on the internet. There's been a lot of them popping up over the past couple years. I think, was it the inclusion of B5 on HBO Max that did it? Probably.
Yeah, there's been about, and by the way, checks in the mail for saying it's the best one. I appreciate it. But there's probably been about 3 waves of B5 podcasts. There was a wave that came out early to late 2000s that included the Babylon podcast, which is actually called Friends of Ours. It included the audio guide to Babylon 5 and a few other ones. And then I think you had a couple more come out in the late teens. And then with the double whammy of COVID and then also Babylon 5 winding up remastered on HBO Max, that kind of got the rest of us kind of motivated to do it. My co-host and I, Blake, have been talking about doing it for almost a decade now. We finally decided to pull the trigger. So we've been going at it now for 2.5 years or 2 years.
You guys are on season 4 now, right?
Yeah.
And you're one of those podcasts that covers a series straight through. You started with The Gathering, and you're going episode by episode with deep discussions. What I find really interesting about your podcast is you have sometimes you'll have up to 8 to 9. I think you may have had 10 co-hosts at one time on one episode, but it doesn't, I don't know how you do it. You're like herding cats over there, but you do such a good job because it's so listenable. And I know everybody's personality. Everyone has a distinct voice. No one's really talking over each other, yet it all sounds very natural. And there's great banter along with really great, compelling analysis of the show. I have no idea how you do that. I've hosted a few podcasts in the day, and specifically TV show podcasts. I did one on Mr. Robot years ago. I launched one about Star Trek Discovery a few years ago. That's still going on. But I could never handle more than having 2 or 3 co-hosts. Just as a podcast nerd, how do you do that with so many co-hosts and just make it make sense?
Well, I appreciate that. It is absolutely herding cats. one of the nice things is that everyone on the show I have been friends with for at least 20 years. A couple of them, Mike and Emily, I were friends with in high school. So we've known each other for 30 years. So that makes things easier. And one of the things I really want to do with this show, because I had listened to a lot of B5 podcasts as well as other TV reviews, and usually the setup is you've got a podcast where it's people who have watched the show already talking about the show, which is great, and I enjoy those. But usually you don't get anyone experiencing it for the first time. And unlike you, I watched B5 in the 90s. I was there watching The Gathering on PTEN in 1993. And so I haven't been able to experience this show as a newbie, as we call them, in 3 decades. So I really wanted to get some folks on there who had not experienced the show before. And then also I picked a couple friends who really have not experienced sci-fi. So that is also interesting. This is not only their first dabble in B5, it's their first dabble in sci-fi television. So I had one of our newbies calls it the Star War. So it tells you how much they're into sci-fi.
Yeah.
But it's been great because, and like many people who find this show, they have learned to love it along the way, and some of them didn't love it at first, which is even more fun because we have that dynamic. So in terms of herding the cats, they all yell at me and hate me sometimes, but we get it done.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the show. I know you're on season 4. There's only 5 seasons. You're going to get through season 5. I guess my next question is going to feed into what we're going to talk about today, which is the B5 movies, the Babylon 5 TV movies, and the new made-for-DVD movie. Are you guys going to cover the ancillary material, the movies, the Crusade, stuff like that? Because you only have like a season and a half left of show proper to go.
So we are going to cover most of the movies that deal. Well, we've decided so far, and we're going to finish our show probably recording in September. So we're nearly there. But we've decided so far that we are going to do anything that's related to the station proper. So that means, obviously they started with The Gathering. We just did Third Space. We are going to do in the beginning.
Did you say turd space?
Well, hey, we're going to get to that. But yes, that is what Mike coined it on our show, Turd Space. But we're going to do River of Souls. We're going to do The Road Home. I will probably do the Call to Arms, although that one is kind of a question mark because it's more of a pilot for Crusade. Right. I don't think we're going to do Legends of the Rangers. We'll see what happens. And I also am questioning Lost Tales. But we're going to figure it out as we go. Now, are we going to do Crusade? Not with the show proper, but we may do some kind of bonus episodes with Crusade. My thing is I am doing this chronologically in the show. And so for those who have watched the entire show, there's a big gap between season 5, episode 21, and the season finale, the series finale, Sleeping in Light. And so a lot of this stuff, River of Souls, Call to Arms, Legend of the Rangers, Crusade, they all fall in that 20-year gap between the 2 episodes. And I don't want to be bogged down in stuff that honestly is lower quality than what B5 was. Sure. And then, oh, by the way, here is Sleeping in Light. I want to make sure the newbies experience Sleeping in Light in a way where they haven't had to run the gauntlet to get to it. So that's what we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, that's a good plan. I'm kind of doing the opposite and starting with the not so great stuff that I still kind of think is great, which is the movies. Today we're going to talk about just kind of run down all the movies and our opinions on them and kind of the stories behind them and how we feel about them. It's the first episode of this Babylon 5 podcast, which, it's just going to be a loose hang. So I appreciate you coming on to hang out. But I wanted to start with the movies, not only because your show is covering the series proper in such a great way. There are a number of shows that are doing that. I think I just wanted to do something different. And I just finished a series a few months ago and just kind of dove into the movies. And I'm just oddly fascinated by these movies and the stories behind them and why they were made and the quality behind them. And of course, The Road Home that just came out in the middle of last year, that also helped kind of re-energize the fandom and re-energize people to get into the show again and to to start podcast and stuff like
Yeah.
that about the show. We have the new Blu-rays out, which I hope to nab it on Blu-ray soon. So there's a lot of it's a cool wellspring of Babylon 5 shit happening. And it feels good to be in this fandom right now.
And I'm one of the guys who says we haven't peaked yet. I'm going to knock on wood here.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to get reboot news this year. I really, really do.
I really hope so. And I don't have any specific wants or needs from the reboot, just that it is halfway as compelling as the original show was. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, I trust JMS. He's going to be show running it. And also, even if it's, not spectacular, it will get people to go, okay, this is a reboot of something. Let me go back and watch this thing I haven't heard about before.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to bring more people into the fandom one way or the other. And if you're a member of JMS's Patreon, you know a little bit more than what we all can say. But I'm hopeful, and I'm knocking wood. That's all I'm going to do.
I haven't read the latest Patreon post in the past, several weeks. So if there's something new, I'm probably going to dive into it tonight. So
yeah, there's something in there. He gave a little something out. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Yeah, I've become a huge fan of JMS too. I read his autobiography, which is amazing. Yeah. I know you've read it.
Mm-hmm.
And it does definitely give some great insight into Babylon 5 and into these movies we're going to talk about. But really, it gives great insight into the man and his family and what inspired him to become such a prolific writer. And it also makes you think about the themes of Babylon 5 when you read that book. Like that theme that runs throughout the show of embracing righteous rebellion in the face of creeping fascism is so damn potent throughout the show. And you see that in JMS's life when you read this book so much. And it's also so relevant today, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean,
more so today than it was in the 90s, I would argue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of people say, the show's prophetic. Of course, a lot of this stuff has been going on since the beginning of time. But yeah, it does feel more relevant now than it did in the 90s. That's one of the main reasons I love the show. The theme of outgrowing your parents through struggle and strife on this massive cultural scale is so interesting, so specific. You have such compelling characters and talented actors that just make a meal of everything they're given. Especially, the fan favorites, Peter Jurasik, Andreas Katsoulas. Really, everybody's just really good.
Every one of them knocks it out of the park. And the thing you got to recognize, too, with this show is it wasn't Star Trek in the way that they had a big budget. These guys filmed on an old hot tub factory lot.
Yeah.
And they were working for, at the end, they were getting about $1 million an episode. But that's nothing compared to the $4 million that every Star Trek episode was getting, and so forth and so on. So it's what they did with what they had is just an amazing, and as JMS points out, faith manages, and it did.
It definitely did. And I'm glad you said faith manages, because I want the listener to know, whoever's listening to this, obviously we're going to talk some spoilers today, and you are the Babylon 5 OG. You can quote the show. I just got into the show and I love it, but I'm just starting. So I can kind of the only quote I can think of is "not the one," and I'll probably screw that up if I try to say it again.
Not the one, not the one.
Exactly. So, I might trip up a little bit. I've only gone to the show once. I've only seen these movies once. So this podcast is going to help me really dive in and explore the entire show again with a bunch of different people. So I'm excited about that.
It's okay though. I still make mistakes. And when I do, our commenters make sure they let me know that I make mistakes. Cause I've watched this show dozens and dozens of times, but I have purposefully not watched the whole show since we've started this podcast. And so the last time I did a full watch through, which included half of season 4 and season 5 that we haven't gotten to yet, was in 2019. So I am watching week to week with our newbies. The first time I've watched week to week of this show since 1990s. And so, I mess up sometimes, and my fans let me know. It's okay. It's okay.
Well, hopefully they won't be too hard on me. So this podcast series, which oddly is kicking off with talking about some of the Babylon 5 content that a lot of fans just kind of skip or are not interested in. This series is actually called Essential Babylon 5. And I'm going to try and cover the best of the series, or what I think is the best. So I do think that some of the movies fit under that category, maybe not all of them.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to go through some of these movies, get your opinion on them, and maybe get your rankings on them. Tell me which ones you like the best. That'll help me going forward, because I definitely want to do like full episodes about at least 2 or 3 of these movies.
Yeah.
So Babylon 5 has like 8 movies or 8 movie-ish pieces of content.
Technically, The Lost Tales are 2 episodes, but they came out on 1 DVD, so you could definitely call it a movie, and it's not.
Right.
It's not on the Blu-ray, so you gotta go find it. It's on its own. So yeah.
Exactly. Hit up those thrift stores. But it's great, especially if you're a new fan like me and you burn through binge watching the series and you're jonesing for more B5 content afterwards. Like, it's just great. You're like, oh, there's like 8 movies. Hell yeah. There's also Crusade for that, which I just started watching last week and I'm enjoying, despite how the network apparently mishandled that show.
Yeah.
That's
and since you've read JMS's autobiography, you know how that all shuffled out. Crusade was canceled before it hit the airwaves, so it's disappointing. I think Crusade had a lot of potential, and unfortunately, it never got a chance to find its legs.
That's a bummer, because the cast is great. I mean, Gary Cole playing this very anti-Sheridan character is so cool. Yeah.
And Galen's one of my favorite characters in the B5 universe. I love Galen a lot. And actually, you said there was 8 movies. There was going to be another one. JMS doesn't own the rights to the TV show, so he's at the will of Warner Brothers on that. But he actually, in his contract, he owns the rights to any movies that are made. Not straight to DVD, but actual theatrical movies. And so in the early 2000s, he had written a script that was called The Memory of Shadows. And it was going to be led by Galen, tracking down Shadow Tech. Wow. And you know what? I would have loved to see that movie, but unfortunately it never got made. But so there could have been 9.
It could have been 9. One could have been theatrical. Well, we're holding out hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're holding out hope that things haven't peaked yet. So we'll see. But yeah, the movies that were produced are an odd thing for B5, right? Because the thing about this series, the thing it does best, most people would say, is long form arc-based storytelling, right? Pulling you in with these extended, emotional, epic arcs that span the entire series. Like watching things from the early seasons pay off in massive ways in later seasons, experiencing the rewarding growth of each character, finding all these surprises along the way, watching the changes, the evolutions of the show and the characters over the 5-year span. That just was something that really wasn't done on primetime TV in the 90s. And it does it so exquisitely that so many shows and showrunners have modeled themselves after what JMS did in the 90s with B5. But that's not what these movies do, especially these, like a chunk of them are just these weird little stories that don't seem to carry the dramatic weight of the series. Of course, none of these movies benefit from the arc-based storytelling. So I get why a lot of people maybe don't like the B5 movies, and that's cool. Like, but me, I see the faults in these movies. I'm not super compelled by most of them, but I find parts of them boring and corny. But I still kind of find them very watchable and really fun. And there's one in particular that I've actually seen twice already, and it's just a fun one. I own the 5 movie collection on DVD, and I've sought out the others on various platforms. I kind of don't love them, but I'm fascinated by them. So, besides the background history of how these movies got made and that kind of context, just what's your overall opinion of the B5 movie canon?
Going into this watch through that I'm doing now, aside from The Gathering, because it's essential viewing because it's the pilot, and In the Beginning, which is kind of a pilot for those who came to the show late. The other ones, as you say, are kind of really They don't need to be watched if you don't want to. And to that extent, for a couple of these, I watched them on TNT when they aired, and I have not watched them again. So that was 1998. Well, and then Legend of the Rangers came out later, and so did the Lost Tales. But for Third Space, River of Souls, and Call to Arms, I don't think I've watched any of them in the last 20 some odd years until this rewatch. So for me, as an old school fan, I kind of let them go on the wayside. But that being said, I have been honestly, I've been surprised with how much that I do find things I enjoy about them. There's definitely areas where, oh, this was padded because you needed an hour and 30 runtime rather than 45 minutes. And that gets a little doggish sometimes. But for the most part, I think if you leave them on the table and you don't watch them, it's not going to hurt you in terms of recognizing what B5 is. But I think you're going to be you'll get something out of it if you watch them, whether they're good or not. Because to your point, we have such amazing characters in the show. The movies give some of these characters time to shine when they probably didn't get as much time elsewhere, just because they get elevated. And part of that is behind the scenes. They didn't have a lot of money to film these, so JMS and the team couldn't hire all the main players for all the movies. So for some of them, you get some of them, and other movies you get some other people, and the other people are missing, and so forth and so on. And that really is just because of budget. So that it allows people like Lockley and River of Souls to come out and have some more to do, and so forth and so on. So that makes them worthwhile in my book, at least a little bit. Will I rewatch them as much as I watch the series? No, but they're still enjoyable.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, especially the way some of these movies highlight some of the side characters, right? So I'm just going to list the movies real quick in order, and then I'm going to ask you for your favorite. So
you're going to put me on the spot. Okay.
Going to do it. So we start with The Gathering, 1993, the original pilot. Then
which version? There's two.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that. and then there's In the Beginning. So that's 5 years later, 1998 on TNT. Third Space, 1998 as well. River of Souls, also 98, part of that TNT trilogy, right?
Mm-hmm.
A Call to Arms comes out in 1999, largely a pilot or a backdoor pilot for the Crusade series.
Mm-hmm.
Legend of the Rangers, 2002.
Sci-Fi Channel.
On Sci-Fi Channel, maybe the biggest oddity of the bunch, which was itself supposed to be a pilot for a new series. Mm-hmm. Babylon 5, The Lost Tales, which, as you talked about before, is kind of two different dispersed episodes slapped together and sold as a special. Maybe we'll talk about it. Mm-hmm. And the latest one, the animated feature Babylon 5, The Road Home, just came out in 2022. So yeah, give me your favorite. Let's talk about it.
I would say my favorite is In the Beginning, even though it really is just a clip show. But
very well said. Yes. Yeah.
I love it because it is a good entry point to the series. I don't ever tell anybody I know a lot of people do this, but I never tell somebody to start watching In the Beginning as an entry point because there's way too many spoilers in it. But
yes,
it is a good entry point. And I think it's the most well made because you're able to use a lot of plot points that have already come along. It's much more, it feels more epic than the other movies. To your point, they're kind of side quests and they really don't deal with the series proper that much. Within the Beginning, it is the first 4 seasons of the show made to fit an hour and a half runtime, and it's done really well. I think it's the one that holds up the most of those 90s and early 2000s movies.
In the Beginning, I think, is maybe the only one of these movies that is truly essential. It's something you're going to get a lot out of it if you're a fan and if you've seen the entire series. I think it's great to show to new viewers after they've seen the bulk of the series, maybe up to the end of season 4. Mm-hmm. And I think TNT commissioned this thing in 1998 because the show jumped networks to TNT, right? In 98?
Correct.
And TNT wanted kind of an explainer movie to get new fans interested in this property that they purchase. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Because, you couldn't binge all 4 seasons, although TNT, to their credit, did play all 4 seasons before it came out, when they took license of it. But there's no streaming, there's no DVDs, there's no VHS unless you have somebody who pirated them for you, which I did. But if you want to get into season 5 of a show, this movie was the way to catch you up.
It's a prequel, but it's a rare prequel that enriches the series while also sometimes feeling like a DVD extra or bonus feature reel, which is odd.
You're completely right. It is a prequel, but in true JMS fashion, it also is a sequel, because we get to see Londo 20 years after season 5, and we get to have those interactions that really don't pay off until Sleeping in Light, and some of them never pay off because we didn't get anything else after that. So it definitely is something to where, you said, I mean, I think even though a lot of it truly is just clips from other episodes, it is essential watching, and I think it's the most theatrical of all of them.
It really is. I really like a lot of In the Beginning. The bookend pieces with Londo, as you mentioned, are fascinating and so tragic, just to see what he's become right at that point. The reveal that those framing scenes take place during, it's War Without End, right? They take place during that. Yeah. It's just awesome. And
right before his death, like literally minutes before his death.
Right.
Spoilers.
But there will be spoilers. This is a show for fans.
You already called it out.
Yeah. But, somewhere around the middle of this movie, this one feels like a bunch of bonus features strung together instead of like the gripping narrative kind of loses its way a little bit, especially if you've seen the series. We see a lot of scenes retelling us information we already know from the series, or even scenes repeated from the series. And while I sometimes appreciate the extra context or the new context, a lot of it just feels like we're watching stuff I'd already seen and already knew, and it gets a little boring. Right.
I will say the one area where I think the different perspective is good is when we get to the Battle of the Line, because we didn't know how Delenn went from Atonement Delenn, where she basically starts the war, and I stand behind that. I had a fight on my podcast about it.
I heard it.
Starts it. To Delenn we see in The Gathering. How do we get there? And this shows us those seeds at the Battle of the Line that we didn't get before. And then also we get the new information that the Vorlons were there too, and Kosh was there too. So that's the one big reveal of In the Beginning that we didn't have before. Also, the idea that Delenn tried to sue for peace, and Londo was the one who stopped that peace.
Right.
So I love those little bits that you only get in The Beginning.
You also find out that Sheridan met Delenn beforehand, and that Jakar, Dr. Franklin, and Sheridan went on a crazy adventure together.
It's like
5 years before they actually met. So little fun retconning there.
Yep.
Despite that, like some of the new stuff in this movie is great. Like one piece of it that just burned itself into my memory, and it's Londo's speech about humanity's bravery and perseverance during the Minbari War, and the visual sequence that plays over that is so artfully done.
Yes,
that's beautiful. It's a beautiful part of the movie. Also, there's a shit ton of spoilers for the series in this, so the idea that some people actually encourage others to start the series by watching this is weird to me, but to each his own. I wouldn't do that.
We're going to have our new. Okay.
Oh, I'm happy you didn't start your newbies with this movie. Are you guys are eventually going to cover this?
They're going to get it right after season 4, so we're about 12 episodes away from In the Beginning.
Right on. So In the Beginning, your number 1 B5 movie.
Yeah.
What's number 2 for you, Scott?
I got to go with the new one, The Road Home.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. For one, cheesy wise, it is like coming home. We haven't had these characters together since the late 90s. We had a few of them pop up here and there in other media, but really we have not gotten to see Sinclair and all of those folks again now. And I really think they did a great job. I feel JMS put together a good story. The animation I thought was really good. I'm not a big fan of quote unquote modern animation. I'm more of a 80s 90s kind of guy, but they did a really good job. It looks like high quality stuff, which is Warner Brothers Animation. That's what they're known for. And then also, I love that it leaves us in a place where we're ready for more, and I think that was intentional. I think that the idea that it may be a different multiverse universe, but all of our friends are together, ready for a new adventure at the end, and I love that.
I found that really surprising and really fun and hopeful, that ending. I would
Yes.
love to see more adventures take place in that universe, in that timeline, whatever you want to call it, that the movie leaves us on, with a fresh face Sheridan meeting the bald and bonehead Delenn for the first time, and the characters we love still, relatively young and alive and all together. Even Sinclair is around.
Well, you have Lockley, Sinclair, and Sheridan all on the Zocalo at the
Yeah,
same time.
so
I'm like,
cool.
how do you pull that off? Well, you use a different universe, is what you do.
Yeah. I like the movie. It's definitely one that I feel like I'll probably rewatch every year just to get the going home vibes from it, just to get the celebration vibes of the entire series. Um, One of the best things about it is, well, the animation is excellent. But one of the best things about it is how Bruce Boxleitner just instantly inhabits Sheridan. Does
Mhm.
such a great job throughout the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Like, you can tell it's his favorite role to play. Every time he's asked to play it, even years after the series is over, he just slides right in there and does a great job, and
Yes.
kind of feels like he's having a blast.
I also too, I like that we get some closure for some of our cast in this movie too.
Mm,
I was really hoping for closure for my buddy Lanier, which I didn't get, but it's okay.
yeah.
When I found out Bill Movie was part of the cast, I was like, okay, here it is. This is gonna make up for season 5. Here it comes.
Redemption. Yeah.
But that may be the next movie. I'm sure. I'm 80% on the reboot. I am 99% sure, and I don't have any inside information. I'm just basing this off my assumptions. I'm 99% sure, based on the sales of that thing and how easy they are to make for Warner Brothers. When you look at DC stuff they put out like every 6 months, this will not be our last B5 animated movie. So maybe we'll get a telepath war or something. Who knows? But I love the fact that you meet Jakar beyond the rim, which is wonderful. Just the idea that Jakar found himself at the end. And yes, it's not really Jakar, it's quote unquote God, but you get the idea that there's a reason why that entity picked Jakar, because he probably ran into Jakar on his little quest to find out what's out there. You get to see what happens to some of our other characters. Franklin is off being a teacher and still friends with Garibaldi. You get to see just the progression of these folks. And my favorite movie of all time is Interstellar, so I'm all for the idea that there's more that connects us than the scientific stuff. So the idea that there's a connection between Delenn and Sheridan that bridges the time, that's great. I love that. It's cheesy enough for me to latch on to.
I love it too, and it echoes a theme that we saw in the series in Zahadum, one of the best episodes of the series.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really glad you mentioned the scene where Sheridan meets Jakar beyond the rim.
Yeah.
Because, you see a lot of posts and a lot of people in fandom saying that's not Jakar. It should have been the other guy. What's the other alien?
Lorian.
Yeah, it should have been Lorian. But, I love that you appreciate that is thematically Jakar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
what counts.
When last we saw him, if you don't count Legends of the Rangers, when last we heard of Jakar, him and Lita went on a quest beyond the rim to find out what's out there.
Yeah.
And by this, and of course, the fact that we lost Andreas Katsoulis, it makes it even more impactful, but we know that Jakar found what he was looking for. And of all the characters that needed to find what he was looking for, that's Jakar.
Yeah, it's wonderful closure for that character, and a wonderful final meetup between him and Sheridan, who I thought always had a special relationship on the show.
I love the line Jakar says to him, "You seem to need a friend."
Mm-hmm.
That's just like, yeah, That's what he needed right there at that moment. He needed Jakar, and he got it. And God, but Jakar too.
But yeah, the just one last thing on the road home. The animation design of the station and the ships is just beyond unreal. This is what you want this stuff to look like when you watch the original series. I have a special love for the original effects, and and the way they've remastered them now, it looks really good. Even from season 1, like they were going for something and they did it, right? The tech wasn't always there, but the art was there. But what we see in this animated movie is just like the pure vision, like the best version of the way the station could look, the way the ships could look. It's just beautiful.
Absolutely. That was the first image that JMS put out when it got announced that this was coming. And just that picture of the station, it has never looked more beautiful. And it's animated, but you really, I mean, that station view that they put out, I mean, it looked like, okay, that was everyone looking at that and saying, okay, they're going to do this right. Now, I know some people will disagree with me and say they didn't do it right or whatever, but I think everything that they could have done to make that something that's worth coming back to 20 some odd years later, they did. And I also want to really throw out to the voice cast who picked up the ball for people we lost. They did a really excellent job. No one tried to ape anybody. They all did their own thing, but every one of them gave respect and honor to those characters that they took over for people. And that's what JMS had said. He said he called up all the existing cast members and said, hey, if we do this, we're going to have some people come in and speak on behalf of our friends we've lost. If anyone has a problem with that, we're not doing it. And all of the original cast said, we're good. And they did it right.
Yeah. Despite what you think about the plot elements of The Road Home, where it fits in canon in the series, or maybe it doesn't, for all these reasons we talked about, it's still a really special movie. And it's one I'll definitely go back to over and over.
And it is one that our newbies will watch right before sleeping in light.
Well, very nice. All right. We're still in the top 3. What's your third favorite B5 movie?
Oh, I would, it's a steep decline. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
But I would say the TNT version of The Gathering is next. I really honestly can't watch the original Gathering anymore.
Which one is was on Tubi and Max?
That's TNT's version.
Okay.
So when you watch it, it'll say TNT presents.
Oh.
The two main differences are, well, there's 3 differences. The soundtrack. So when you watch The Gathering, if it has a normal Christopher Franke soundtrack that you're used to on everything B5, that's the TNT version. The original version had some kind of electrical synth thing going that was just, they were experimenting and it didn't go well. And then 2, there's inserted language in there. For example, when Kosh meets the shapeshifter that is supposed to be Sinclair, he says Intel Za Valen. That's not in the original The Gathering. And then the one I think that is the best change is the woman who played I always have Lurker's Get Up. I always plan ahead. Yeah, Laurel Takashima, which was Tamlin Tamita, was the actress. The studio, in their amazing minds, felt that she was too harsh in terms of her voice work. So they made her redub all of her stuff for the original The Gathering. And so they made her toned down and a little bit meeker and, stereotypically the woman character. And so the TNT version, they used her original performance, and it's just much better, and it allows her to be the character that she meant it to be. So I like that too in the TNT version. But yeah, I enjoy it because it does give us an entryway into all of this world, and it's something that I think has to be watched in order to start. You can't, I guess you could start watching on Midnight on the Firing Line, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Well, you might be surprised.
Is that where you started?
I wanted to admit that's how I started. I've actually never seen The Gathering all the way through. I just got into the show last year, and I started watching on Tubi without an episode guide in front of me or any one of the 4 or 5 suggested viewing orders that are floating around. So I just went to Tubi, I hit play, That's what Tubi played me, Midnight on the Firing Line. But I thought that was such a great, captivating episode that I just kept going, right? Even after I found out about The Gathering, I was like, oh, they did that like a year or two earlier than this episode. I was like, I don't really want to go back right now. I just want to go forward. So I've never really felt like going back to it. I think Midnight is such a great introduction to the show. And I also heard how JMS had some issues with the way The Gathering turned out.
Yeah, him and the director did not get along.
Like you said, there's a re-edit that kind of mitigates some of those issues. Yeah, I will watch it. I will watch it for this podcast. Maybe I'll watch both of them and kind of compare and contrast. But yeah, do you think The Gathering is that important and enriching to the story as a whole? Or should we treat it like a bonus feature? Like apparently it's presented on the new Blu-ray as a bonus feature.
It is, yeah. I believe it is. And that's how I started my show. I started the newbies watching The Gathering. Now, I told them when they started watching, I was like, this is going to be a little rough. It drags. The special effects aren't there yet. The sets, there's like maybe 2 sets that they redress over and over again because they were on a shoestring budget. And all the characters haven't found their way yet. But there's a couple things in there that I really do feel helps to set up the whole universe. And really what it comes down to is the interactions between everybody in Jakar and Londo. I think that the way The Gathering sets up Jakar is great because Jakar is the villain or one of the villains of The Gathering. And I think that's very important when you start the arc of Jakar. And Londo and Jakar are my 2 favorite characters in the entire show. So in order to get the full press of who Jakar is, I think going back to The Gathering is really important because at the end of The Gathering, literally he is the mustache twirling villain who they use as comedic relief. And to see him go from that to the savior and leader of his people and somebody who is a guide and a dear friend to nearly everybody, including Londo, is extremely fun to watch that arc. So just for Jakar alone, I would make The Gathering a start. But also it gives you the universe. Londo talks about how the Centauri used to be a superior empire, and now they are a zoo attraction for the humans to come check out 9 to 5. Stuff like that kind of gives you a play. I wish it was a better movie/pilot. I think JMS would agree with me on that. But for what it is, I think it's good. But between the top 2 I mentioned and this one, there is absolutely a steep decline between those 2 and this one.
All right. Well, let's dive further into that steep decline.
Now we're getting into the valley. Here we go.
Yeah. Into the valley. What's next on the list for you?
Honestly, this changed last night. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
When you told me we were going to be doing this, I realized, okay, as I mentioned, I am not watching ahead. So I was like, well, crap, I got to watch some movies here tonight. And I watched River of Souls, which I have only watched one time.
Oh, you didn't have to do that. I could have gone with your 30-year-old memories, but I really appreciate you watching it. Yeah.
No, I checked them all out. I felt like I needed to. And actually, River of Souls, I always remembered as being one of the worst ones I'd ever seen. And again, it's not the top, but I felt that it was a more put together movie than what I thought it originally was. The themes are there. You have some characters that you don't get to see interact very often, including Lockley kind of having a lead of it. You get to see Garibaldi when he is done being the season 4, season 5 Garibaldi. He's in his new life, which I enjoy. You also see that in Call to Arms, but and the fact that Martin Sheen played a butthole alien 1 year before he's Josiah Bartlett just makes me chuckle. Literally, that movie came out 1 year before West Wing, which is another one of my favorite shows. So I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. But yeah, no, I would say The River of Souls right now is number 4 for me.
I find River of Souls oddly compelling. I think it's one of the more comedic movies.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the stuff between Lockley and who's her number 2? Forgot the character's name.
Oh my goodness! See, I'm really doing terrible tonight, aren't I?
Lockley and Corwin. Is it Corwin?
Corwin, thank you.
Yeah,
yes, Corwin.
All that stuff. Like I can see how if you were a fan in the 90s and you're watching this, you're like, what the fuck is going on? But it's like with some like distance from it, it's just fun. It's just hilarious, right? And you get not only Martin Sheen being a complete wacko throughout the entire movie, which if you're into camp, you can feast on that and have a great time. But there's lots of great Jerry Doyle / Garibaldi stuff in this.
There
And
is.
seeing Garibaldi clash with Lockley through a whole 90-minute movie, that's a blast for fans, I think. But yeah, this is just a weird little side quest that is pretty fun. Like, I'm going to echo maybe like the worst of the fandom here a little bit. It's like, why couldn't they do something that is, if it's a side movie, why couldn't he write something about the telepath war or something more about the shadows? Why do we have to have a movie based around one of the least loved characters or aliens of B5, which is the Soul Hunters? Like, that's a little odd, but you got to applaud the effort, right? You got to applaud the effort. Here's one of the somewhat maybe most repellent aliens that's ever been on this show, and JMS was just like, you know what? I'm diving in on this. I'm gonna really double back on this and see if I can make a meal out of this or spin some gold out of this hay here. Yeah.
Well, and two things contextually on that kind of get to your point. When we watched this the first time in 1998, this was about 2 months before Sleeping in Light came out. So not only are you watching this thinking, okay, we're going to get another movie, and Third Space was meh, but in the beginning was really good. So let's see what this new movie is. And we're like, this is how we're going to almost end the series. Okay, interesting. But also, I'm not always a defender of JMS, but I will this time. Is dude wrote all but one episode of season 5. He wrote all of season 4, all of season 3. And then TNT comes to him and says, okay, now I want you to write Crusade, which he is writing as he's doing all of this. And I want you to make 3 more movies. Okay. So I'll give him a pass on the fact that he's probably wearing his fingers down at the typewriter right now and just trying to get something going, which is why a lot of the jokes don't land very well in River of the Souls. But yeah, what are you going to do?
I wonder if JMS understands the power of the word no now, because he didn't back then, and he still puts out tons of shit. Like if you look at all the comics he writes, it's just endless. Yeah. Like he just keeps working. He
put out again, it's on his Patreon, so I won't go into too much detail. But he put out a few days ago a day in the life of JMS, and basically the man starts writing at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night and doesn't finish until the sun comes up every single night. And if you want to get a good idea of how he writes, in one of his books that came out a few years ago, Together We Will Go, which is it's a good book, but it's a hard thing to go through reading that, because it deals very much with suicide. So just if anyone hasn't read it yet, I'm throwing it out there in case that's something you don't want to deal with. But there are 2 writers as characters in that book, and you can definitely tell that JMS is channeling himself into those 2 writers, and so you get a better idea of how he writes. And dude's crazy.
Well, he's one of those writers where he wakes up in the morning and the characters are talking to him, right? And he just has to think about, okay, what's this character going to do next? That's what I'm going to write, and it just flows out of him.
Not to go too far off the movie track, but real quick to that point you just made, one of the best stories I love is Veer kills the Emperor Cartagia. Mm-hmm. He's writing the script, and he said this a couple times. He's writing the script, and up until right before he gets to that page in the script, Londo was going to be the one to kill Cartagia. And then Veer, in the back of his head, said, no, it should be me. It should be me. Let me do it. And that's how he wrote it. So Veer, the character in JMS's head, said, I want to be this person. This makes more sense. And I just love that he writes that way.
And it makes that moment so much more heartbreaking and unexpected. It reverberates throughout the rest of the series. It's so good. All right. So I'm going to try and guess your next.
Go for it.
Third Space.
Yep. You'd be right.
Yeah.
That was going to be my one before River of Souls until I watched River of Souls again last night. Third Space, again, same idea. The one thing I forgot to mention in River of Souls, we also get Ian McShane, which makes me want to go watch Deadwood again. By the way,
Martin Sheen and Ian McShane.
Yeah, in a show together on TNT. It's great. But no, for Third Space, it's kind of the same idea. I think the reason why Third Space falls a little bit farther for me is it really truly feels like this was a 45-minute episode that got padded to 90 minutes. It really feels that way. There's a lot of stuff in there that just, how long do we need to watch Sheridan fly towards the artifact with a nuke strapped on his back? It was a lot. We got to watch it a lot. It's just stuff like that where it just feels a little too padded for me.
Yeah, at least at this point, the visual effects are pretty good.
They are. They put a lot of time in it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're like at an all-time high when this movie came out. They looked really good, really sharp. The space battles are fun. This is B5 as action movie, right?
Yes, it is.
Which it kind of never was before. I mean, of course, it did have some great space battles throughout the series, but at this point, it was like, this is just an action movie. And this is also slightly inspired by, the Call of Cthulhu. We have a Cthulhu-like alien race. I never really got into the myth of Cthulhu or any of these Cthulhu stories. I understand like the whole like existential threat thing that it represents and tentacles, but yeah, that stuff never really grabbed me. But apparently JMS was into it and he kind of worked that into this story. Yeah, this one, I can't praise this one too much because it's really just kind of a basic action movie, but I kind of love this one. It's the one that I popped in twice and I can just kind of put on and have in the background and go to it and be like, oh shit, that's happening. Cool. It's just kind of a fun, mindless, movie. And here's the thing that elevates it for me. The scene in the lift.
Yes.
With Zach Allen and Lita. There are differing opinions throughout the fandom. I think it's great that not only does Jeff Conway get this meal of a scene, it's all one take, presumably, and he just nails it. It's so good. And if you know anything about the tragic arc of that guy's real life, seeing him get that win just feels so good. Mm-hmm. I was like rooting for him the whole time throughout that, 2, 3, 4 minute monologue that he has. And it's so good. And it's so Zach Allen. Mm-hmm. It's just excellent. And then Patricia Tallman just completely being zonked out and non-reactive the entire time while this guy is pouring his heart out. It's just a master class. It's just so great seeing these two actors get the scene you kind of always wanted them to have in the series, where he's expressing what he always wanted to express, where you kind of always knew was there between these two characters, but was never truly explored. Some people might say it's they're throwing us a bone, but really it's more than that. I think it's emotional, it's funny. That scene has an arc to itself. I think it's great.
And I love the line that he says as he walks out, probably better anyway, because after 10 days, I would have asked her to marry me.
Yes.
Which again,
and you believe that. Fact. You still believe it. Yeah.
And we talk about Jeff Conway a lot on our podcast. And this is, unfortunately, this is the high point of his career after the 80s. But I'm so glad that he earned that for himself, because when he was brought on, much like, Robert Downey Jr. with Iron Man, when he was brought on as Zach Allen in just a couple bit parts, people told JMS, don't do it. This guy is going to flake on you. He's going to flake on you. He always flakes. And JMS gave him a chance, and Jeff earned it. And he became one of the main characters of the show because he's a great actor and he earned every single scene that he got in that show. And it's great to watch.
Yeah, agreed. Okay.
Oh boy.
What's next, buddy?
I'm going to have to say, even though I still argue it may not be a quote unquote movie, but I would say The Lost Tales are next. For much the same reason that I say River of Souls, Lockley gets to, and Ryan from Yum Yum Podcast has brought this up with Crusade as well too. You never get to see Lockley outside of Sheridan's shadow in season 5. With River of Souls and now with The Lost Tales, you get to see Lockley as Lockley. And I do like that episode I like a lot more than the episode with Sheridan and the Child Emperor or whatever. I think the one with the Sheridan the Child Emperor, it doesn't really go anywhere. But with the one with Lockley and Galen, and again, I already said Galen's one of my favorite characters. I really do like that one with the demon and we get to have brother Theo back and all of that. I do enjoy that one quite a bit. So, but the other one, nah.
So this is the other one I haven't seen. It's straight to DVD, low budget project.
Yeah, green screens all the way. It looks like Phantom Menace, but not as good.
Yeah. I've seen clips on YouTube, and it looks very, weatherman green screen. I'm kind of like, I don't want to see the station that way, but I also love the shows and I love these characters, so I'll eventually watch this. So it is Galen. It's kind of 2 episodes spliced together. Is Galen in both of the episodes? Oh, okay.
Galen's just in the one with Lockley.
Got it.
I will say I haven't rewatched this one in a while, so I may be not 100% correct, but I'm pretty sure those 2 episodes are very distinct and they are their own things. I will give JMS credit though. I mean, he was trying to find a way to keep this going, and so he did it on a bare bones budget. And his goal, much like what the animated movie is now, his goal was to do this more. Like, okay, if these sell, we'll do some more Lost Tales, and we'll do some more Lost Tales, and this is how I'll keep it going. So I really appreciate that he took the risk. It didn't do anything that people wanted, and because the sales were so dulled, and that was the end of it. But we get one more story with Lockley and with Galen, and I appreciate that.
From the clips I've seen of the Lost Tales, and even though it's 2007, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though we're at that point, it just looks so cheap and low budget, and it just feels like emblematic of what Warner has always done with this show. Just not throw resources behind it, not try to turn it into the next Star Trek or Star Wars, which is unfortunate. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, no, I agree.
All right. I think we're at the bottom 2.
We got 2 more. We got two more.
All right. Who's not the bottom of the heap? Let's hear it.
Call to Arms. And I think the reason why Call to Arms is less, because people, I can tell already people are yelling at me about how the hell did you put Lost Tales ahead of Call to Arms. Call to Arms, I cannot watch that show. And it's the reason why I can't really watch Crusade that much is I can't stand the soundtrack. I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to do something different.
It is weird.
That synth soundtrack drives me nuts. It's grating. And again, I appreciate that they tried something new. Like when we have the space battles with the Excalibur and we go to nothing, it's quiet. It's just the synth background. You see Sheridan yelling fire, but you don't hear him say it, and so forth and so on. It's just like that movie grates on me because of that soundtrack. That really, truly, I'm giving it like a -10 just for that damn music.
Yeah, it is weird, but it's so weird that I dig it. I think it's just such a weird experimental thing to do. And it continues on in the few episodes I've seen of Crusade. Mm-hmm. Like I saw that they did it in the pilot. I was like, oh, this is what they did in Lost Tales. It's weird and kind of doesn't work, but I want more of it. I don't know why. I don't know. I'm a David Lynch fan. I don't know. But yeah, it's super odd. But what I like about this movie is that you get a Sheridan who is kind of manic with purpose from beginning to end, and then he connects with other high-ranking people in EarthGov that are also tasked with the same purpose, with the same vigor, and risking their careers all for this one quest. And it's a quest movie, and I dig that. You also get to see Garibaldi and Sheridan, together again and being buds, which is great, especially after everything they went through in like season 4 and season 5, especially season 4. They were so at odds. They're kind of back together, hanging out in this one. So that's fun. But yeah, this is not a great movie. I do love that we get to see Tony Todd.
Yes,
as an Earth Force captain. He always owns it in sci-fi. I love seeing that guy. But yeah, I can see why it's at the near the bottom for you here.
I do think the Excalibur is a cool ship. I really do
It
like
is.
what they did there.
Okay, Scott, tell me I'm not the guy who made you watch Legend of the Rangers in 2024.
I do have to rewind a bit because I know that there are people adding me right now on the comments.
Okay.
I just went back because I didn't watch The Lost Tales because I didn't think it was a movie.
Yeah.
And I'm going back. Galen is not in the one with Lockley. He's in the one with Sheridan. And it's not Brother Theo. It's the exact same character called Father Cassidy. So you can tell I haven't watched The Lost Tales since I bought the DVD back in 2007 and I watched it one time. So I need to clear the air.
Do you still have way more credibility in this than I do? So you're good. Yeah.
I completely just forgot what The Lost Tales, how they worked. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did watch Legend of the Rangers for the first time since I saw it on Sci-Fi Channel back in the day. I was so excited when the Sci-Fi Channel finally picked up Babylon 5, not the show proper, but they picked up a new show about the Rangers. The Rangers were so cool. Marcus was great. And Andreas Katsoulis is coming back. He's Jakar in the movie. Oh my goodness, this is going to be great. And then I turn on the movie and I start watching it. And this girl is punching ships from a holographic room. I don't know what is going on. I don't understand. And I still don't.
The weirdest, cringiest thing I've ever seen in this entire franchise is that girl going, oh shit, we're about to get into a space battle. Give me a second. I'm going to slide down into this little shaft. It's like, okay, that's interesting. What's going on? And then I'm going to be suspended in space and do a bunch of kicks and flips while I'm in a 3D representation of the space battle. And the whole time, I have this thing called, maybe you've seen Star Trek, obviously, right?
Sure, yeah. A few times.
You've seen Voyager?
It's my least favorite, but yes.
Okay, mine too. Yep. But there's this thing I have called the Neelix effect, where if you watch the Voyager, the series proper all the way through, you understand they do things with the Neelix character, and he actually becomes a good character, a brave character that you kind of wins you over, right? But there's no denying that he looks like a furry space clown the entire time, and it's ridiculous. And when I'm watching Star Trek Voyager, even if it's one of the good episodes, if somebody who's never seen it or doesn't know about Star Trek walks into the room and sees Neelix on the screen and sees me watching Neelix on the screen and enjoying it, I feel very embarrassed and cringy, right? And so there's what happened in Legend of the Rangers when this woman is punch gunning whatever she's doing. That's definitely the Neelix effect. It is embarrassing to watch. My wife walked into the living room when I was watching this. She's like, "What the hell? What is it? Stop this! This is embarrassing for you. Please don't watch this." But yeah. I do know that was like a concession, right? They had like other plans for that sequence, but it just ended up being that. So, yeah.
Good old, as JMS always runs into, you have budget cuts and he has to deal with it. But I will say, even though I put it at the bottom of my list, and it is at the very bottom of my list, it's still a story by JMS. It allows us to see Andreas one more time because this is in 2002. He will pass in 2006. So we don't get him in Lost Tales because he's already unfortunately gone. And it's directed by Mike Vehar, who is one of my favorite directors from the show. So it's at least got some weird directorial decisions that, unlike the Kung Fu scene, are kind of fun to watch. You can definitely tell it's a Vehar movie. But yeah, no, this is... I'm so glad that B5 didn't end with Legends of the Rangers. I'm just glad it didn't end with that.
One of the crew members is a Drazi, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. Like, yeah. I like the way they set up this crew. They're pretty ragtag. They're kind of Firefly-ish, I think there was potential here for a series if they would have worked out some of these visual kinks and maybe the cast had time to gel, all those things that you say when the pilot's not good and you think the show's going to get good. I think all that's true about this. I don't think it was completely a shit show.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
But yeah, I can see why it's definitely low on your list. Although it is just so weird that I love it. And I found it at Half Price Books on DVD for $7.99. I said, that's too much money for this, but I'm going to buy it. So I do have it. So yeah. And I will be talking about this one because it's just too weird not to ignore, not to
Excellent.
do a whole
I look
episode
forward
about
to it.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to have fun with this one. I appreciate you watching some of these movies over the past several days. Just to be on this podcast, you did me a great favor in doing that and in being on the show. So thanks so much, Scott.
I appreciate it. It's wonderful being here. As you've seen, what I want to do with this fandom is get as many of us to kind of share our love for this show amongst ourselves, but also with anyone who's listening. So we also have the League of Non-Aligned podcast, and I'll take out my sword and tap your shoulders and say, we need to get you on the league. So you can join in those conversations as well too, because it's just fun talking about this show, man.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, thanks for the invitation. You have an open invitation to come on this pod whenever you like. We do have a couple of series we're doing. This is the new Babylon 5 series, obviously. We have we're doing Essential Stargate with my co-host Clyde Haynes. Not sure how your mileage varies on Stargate, but
I watched Universe and I really enjoyed it, but I've never watched SG1 or the other shows. I get dogged by a couple of my co-hosts every time, but I'm pissed off that Universe ended where it did. That's all I got.
Yeah, same here. My co-host on the Essential Stargate series is a Stargate OG, and I'm going through SG1 for the first time with him. So it's kind of like a first one's newbie situation that you have on your pod. So it's pretty fun. I'm also doing a series on essential sci-fi movies, just getting some film critics and friends together to talk about some of the greatest movies out there. And I'm also doing one that I used to call Inessential Sci-Fi. And now I'm calling sci-fi B-sides. Just, I don't want to be that disrespectful anymore. But on that one, let me just tell you what we've covered so far so you kind of get the gist. We covered Cleopatra 2525.
Yeah, I looked at your back catalog.
Okay. All right.
I saw them. Good old space truckers. I saw
and space truckers. Next on the list is Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda.
Kevin Sorbo in all his Hercules glory.
Yes. So look forward to that. But Essential Babylon 5 will be a series ongoing, and it's essentially just going to be kind of a hodgepodge of talking about different Babylon 5 projects and topics. Nice. So, and hopefully the future stuff that we're hoping we're going to get, right?
Knock on wood.
All right, Scott, tell us more about your pod, where to find it, what to do.
Yeah. You can find us by searching Gray 17 Podcast on any of your platforms for podcasts. And also we're on YouTube. Again, just search Gray 17 Podcast. And we come out every week with a new episode. Next week is going to be Lines of Communication. So we are knee deep in season 4. And we just love having people come in and join the conversation and share this show with us. It's great. And so check us out, please.
And again, if you're a B5 fan and you haven't listened to Gray 17, what are you doing? Come on, just
there's a few of them out there.
There might be.
No, whenever you watch any 80s or 90s sci-fi, man, I'm there. Let me know.
All right, I'll keep you to that.
I got my He-Man power sword behind me, so I'm good to go. And by the way, Masters of the Universe is a classic. I stand behind that.
I agree. I have a faker just over to my right, a faker figure. So are you looking forward to Revolution?
Yeah, I liked the first one. I did.
Me too.
Kevin Smith is he's an interesting cat, so I like it.
Yeah. Listener, find the pod at intergalacticpod.co. Find us on Threads and Insta at intergalacticpod. Make sure to sub on YouTube, and thanks for listening.